Keith, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Sure. I'm from Dallas, Texas. That's my original home. I've
Me
lived
too.
all. Oh, are you? What part?
I was born in Dallas. I don't remember exactly where because I moved up here when I was a kid, but I'm now in Minnesota.
Yeah. So I grew up in Dallas proper. I mean, I was literally like about 10, 15 minutes from downtown. Graduated high school. I went to Texas Tech University, and I've lived. I lived in Dallas. I lived in Salt Lake, Denver, Atlanta, Memphis, and now we're back to Dallas. My wife and I moved back here in 2007. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. My wife's a nurse, and I'm a commercial airline pilot. So we got two kids, one who is just about, she graduated already from high school. And then I've got a 15-year-old who is going to be a sophomore. So that's us in a nutshell. Yeah.
Awesome. Could you tell me more about education reform? And you represent families for Frisco, is that correct?
That's correct. So I can't even call it a suburb anymore, but Frisco used to be a suburb of Dallas, but now we've gotten to be a really large city. We've got about 220,000 people that live in Frisco now. And we have, I think, almost 13 high schools. And I couldn't even tell you how many middle schools and elementary, but we've turned into quite a large city. So most people historically have always moved to Frisco, and that's why my wife and I moved here, because Frisco has always been known for really advanced level learning, challenging learning, as it's always been known. So when we moved here in 2007, we made the decision like, hey, we're going to Frisco. That's what it's known for. So it's been a really smooth ride, and it's been really, really rewarding for our kids and for us to see them progress. But over the past 5 years, we've noticed quite a bit of change from what we've been used to for so many years. And so it all kind of came about when COVID came around. I'm sure you've heard that argument. People say, oh, when COVID came around, I started to really see what my kids were learning. And so I guess as a precursor to that, we started to see, I'd say around 2014, 15. Do you remember back around that time, the catchphrase Common Core curriculum? Have you heard of Common Core?
Yeah.
Right. So we started to see that show up in the math classes for our kids. You know, the traditional historical way we've always been taught to do math, multiplication and all that. It gets a quick answer really fast. But with this Common Core way of approach to doing math, it was just this long, drawn out process. We started scratching our heads, and we said, okay, I guess we can deal with this for a little while. And then you fast forward 5 years, when COVID came around, that's when it really started showing up, because the kids now have Chromebooks, and we start seeing ideological teachings that are surfacing. And that was my wake up moment. It was about November of 2020. My son was home, and he had an assignment show up on his laptop from school, and it was all about the catch terms that we're used to hearing now with critical race theory. It's white privilege, and if you're white, you're the dominant class, and you've historically been superior to other races. And these assignments started showing up, and it really came out of nowhere. And my son was smart enough to think, wow, this doesn't seem right. And he showed it to me. And then I really started diving deep into his curriculum and seeing where a lot of this stuff was showing up. So that was my wake up moment. For the first time in 15 years, I went to a school board meeting. I mean, I'd been here for 15 years, and I'd never been to a school board meeting. And I laid out in front of the board all of his assignments and everything that was coming out of that computer. And fortunately, there was a lot of parents that were there at this particular meeting as well, because for some reason, around about fall of 20, that's when this stuff started showing up, and parents really started waking up. So it was I think it was around March of 21 that, for whatever reason, we had a boatload of parents showing up at this meeting with the same exact complaints. And so we started to go in more and more meetings, and we didn't see a lot of change happening as quickly as we'd like to, like the school board really coming out and saying, hey, you know what, that is wrong. It's got to go. We got to get this out of the curriculum. It was just kind of like it fell on deaf ears. So that's how Families for Frisco came to be. So we got a lot of like-minded parents, and we said, hey, the only way that we're going to affect change is to band together, form an organization, and start running candidates for the school board elections. And, that's something I'd never done either. I'd never voted in school board elections. I just typical, I think this is very typical of conservative-minded people in Texas, is that you just assume that Texas is a conservative state. It's always going to be that way. I don't care how many people are moving in. We're always going to be this way, and I got nothing to worry about. And even if we do have something to worry about, there's enough people here that'll fight for me. And so that's the attitude that I took as well, and I paid dearly for it. So we got together, we formed Families for Frisco, and we started to educate parents throughout the year. And so we had an election just past May of 22, a school board election, and we ran two candidates, two really good, solid parents for the board, and we won those two positions. It's a 7-person board, and we got them up on the board. So this is our first foray into making some changes that are really going to make a difference. So that's what we're seeing a lot of. There's a whole litany of things that we're also battling as well. So, but that's pretty much what launched everything for us.
Yeah, awesome. First few questions. Do you happen to have any like pictures, or can you show us the actual things that showed up in the teachings, the CRT stuff?
It's just articles. I mean, I could certainly forward them to you for you to do. So you can look at them yourself. So yeah, I definitely have some things that I could do. It's for me, my son, it was more article based, like all the articles he was given to read. But there are some other evidence that people brought in of just like cartoons that were coming up in the schools and all that, of just racially based kind of cartoons. And is that okay with you if I can email them to your screener? Is that all right? Or
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think that would definitely help people to really understand what you're going through, is if they could see the articles that were problematic, to be able to understand what the issues were in more detail.
Okay, I can do that for sure. For sure.
And how much have you learned about the problem? Like, how did it start? How did it get introduced to the school system? What were the policies that were put in place? Was this a thing from the Texas Board of Education, or was it a local thing? What's the history of the issue?
Yeah, so that's the other thing that we struggle with is, when these assignments were coming, we have what are called TEKS, and it's TEKS. It's Texas Education. I forget what the K is, and standard. So they basically, Texas lays out, hey, when you teach, this is what the standards you have to teach by. And so that was our argument, is that when you started seeing a lot of this critical race theory stuff come around, show me in the TEKS where it says that we should be teaching our kids that, and they couldn't. So, and that was pretty much the proof that our argument was sound, is that it's not supported in the TEKS. And so, we're trying to also look at, is there federal funding involved? Are the feds coming in and saying, hey, we're going to give you X amount of dollars for your programs, but you have to teach these kind of academic standards, or if you want to call them standards at all. So, and it's not just Frisco, it's a lot of school districts that are seeing this stuff pop up. So, and I don't know what's driving it. I don't know with that, what's driving this CRT type stuff. But I think if we had to look at it in a bigger picture, that it has to do with some kind of federal dollars. Now proving that, I don't really have anything to prove, but to be here for 15 years and never see that curriculum in our schools, and then all of a sudden, boom, it shows up. It's just, that's what woke us all up. It's like, and it came so fast. Like, how did it get here so quickly? So, the counter argument to it is that, oh, we're not teaching critical race theory in the schools. That's not technically critical race theory. So, and I'm not an expert in it, but when I see racially based teaching show up in the schools that have never been there before, it's hard to argue that it's not being taught. So, that's pretty much the point that we're coming from. And it's a matter of waking people up to see, hey, you need to start looking at your kids' assignments, because that's what's happening, with these computers. And so, before, with school books, it's, you had, set school books that we've had for years. And now with these computers, they can pipe in whatever they want just through the computers. And so the kids are sitting at home on their laptops. It's hard for you to see exactly what's going on. So, so that's been the policy change that we've seen. So, and a lot of it has to do with social emotional learning. That's a new catchword. Have you heard of that as well? SEL.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's also something that we're looking at as well. So,
yeah, you mentioned articles. Like, are the articles specifically presented by the computer, or is it just like a Google thing? It's like Google presents these, because I know Google is very woke in a lot of ways. Is this
It is.
something that's done by the academic program, or is this just a byproduct of the fact that it's a new computer and it just has Google downloaded?
No, I think it was part of the curriculum for that specific assignment. So it was something that came from the school district. I mean, they had to approve it to get in there. So I don't. They weren't just random articles that the kids just went out and sought after. I mean, they were presented to them. Hey, these are the articles you need to read, and then give us your assessment type of stuff. So. And that's another thing that we're looking at as well is a lot of these school districts use third-party vendors for their curriculums, and so a lot of that is not. We don't think it's being vetted as it should be. There's just a lot of information, and I think a lot of it gets missed, and so that's a trend that we're seeing with these school programs is using outside vendors for a lot of their online-based academics as well.
Yeah, and one thing that is common, like you said, is that it's not technically critical race theory. I think it'd be more accurate to say it's like the consequences of critical race theory, but that's just a waste of words. So I might as well just call it critical race theory, because critical race theory entails like college level standpoint epistemology kind of stuff. So I doubt they're teaching that at the level, but I think that you're right to say that they're teaching the consequences of what critical race theory wants to impose in school systems. Do you
Yeah.
have a lot of people in the audience are very skeptical, and they want to see like actual like examples of this, because it's hard for them to believe. And there's a lot of in the media, they argue against this by saying, oh, it's not really happening, it's all a lie, kind of a thing. And so one of
Right.
the things that would really help for future interviews, if you like had prepared the examples, you could show pictures or like share screen, that would be super helpful to help convince people
Sure.
for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've got some in my phone. I mean, I can show you and just read off to you. I mean, the assignment that really kicked it off for us.
Yeah, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, stand by real quick. I've got so many examples that I've used before, and I agree. Yeah, you want to see stuff that really makes a difference. So this was, and I'll read it, but I don't know.
Yeah,
Can you?
we can't read. No, not
Okay.
even close. We see
All
a
right.
lot of little black lines.
So here's one of the articles that was given to my son to read. And I will, people say, oh, you're just beating a dead horse. You've had this forever. So this came around in November of 20. So the assignment that he was given 5 articles to read based on this kind of woke ideology. So this came out, it's called Definition of Systemic Racism in Sociology. Right. And so
What was the assignment?
it was assignment based on social justice, right?
Well,
That
like, was he like taking a social justice class, or was it just like a math class or something? And was
no, it
the
was part of his English class.
Gotcha.
This is part of. So just, it was just a whole assignment on social justice. Because if you remember, the summer of 2020, all this stuff was going on because of George Floyd. And so we started seeing it interjected into there. So it was an article based on, or assignment based on social justice rights of LGBT folks, rights of minorities, things like that. So this was about systemic racism. We're talking about systemic racism, and so this was given to an 8th grader. So my son was in 8th grade at the time. So this one is called Definition of Systemic Racism in Sociology. So I started looking at this article. And it's got different paragraphs in it. And so we're reading through it. It defines what systemic racism is. And then one of the sub paragraphs, it's bolded. It says, vested group interest among white people. And it says right here, within a racist society, white people enjoy many privileges denied to people of color. Throughout the U.S. history, many white people have opposed certain programs that would increase diversity within education, jobs, such as affirmative action, so forth and so on. And so the next paragraph, it says the racial power of white elites. And it says all white people play a part in perpetuating systemic racism. However, it's important to recognize the powerful role played by white elites. Often unconsciously, white elites work to perpetuate racism through politics, law, education, and the media. So I could go on, and it continues to talk about white elites and white racism. But when you lead off a paragraph that says all white people play a part in perpetuating systemic racism, and that's what really sparked my son's interest. He said, Dad, that's not right. I'm not a racist. And so that was, to me, I don't know, call it what you will. I mean, don't even call it CRT. I call that racist teaching myself, because you're teaching.
Yeah, I would agree. So I think that if it says all white people are contributing to systemic racism, yeah, that's obviously bullshit for sure.
It is. And so one of the counter arguments to this too, Tom, is that, oh, you don't want history taught. And we've never said that. I mean, I tell my people, I said, look, man, my son, I've told teachers, I said, if it happened in history, then that's history. Teach it all. I mean, because it's like the word says, or the phrase says, is, those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. So we've never advocated for not teaching history. Yes, I want my kids taught about slavery. I want them taught about civil rights, about how nasty this country used to be. But I don't want them taught that we're still a systemically racist country, because I mean, we're not. I don't think we are, and I think that's harmful to teach children that's what's going on in our country. So I have serious issues with that.
Yeah. Do you have, like, you said you got 2 people elected to the Board of Education. What exactly are they doing to try to change that?
Well, it's the school board that they got elected to. So, the school board as it is, it's a 7-person board, and historically this board has always voted on different policies 7-0 and everything. Very rarely is there a vote of dissent, and so it's kind of it's I hate to call it a good old boys club, but it just seems they vote as one block. And so we've got 2 people on the board now that are parents and good folks. And so what they're trying to do is, as votes come along on different things. Now, listen, this is their first session, so they just got voted in May. They've only had a couple board meetings, but what they're trying to do is educate the parents on what's going on and start to vote against, some of the things that are coming down the line that they vote on. Many things on curriculum, on budgeting. And so they can create some kind of trail that says, hey, look, here's something I voted against, and this is why I voted against. So we really don't have a lot of power to change things right now, because we're kind of outnumbered 5-2, but we're trying to next year, when the next vote for the board comes along, we'll have 2 more seats open. If we can get a majority, 4 out of 3, then that's how we can really start changing things. So right now we're it's kind of hard to do that, being outnumbered 5-2. So that's what we're trying to do. And it's not just the CRT stuff. I mean, it's a litany of things that we're seeing pop up in the schools. So if you'd like for me to talk more about that, I can. But fire away, whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely would like you to talk about the other things as well. But I'm also curious, like, I understand that the Texas Board of Education has a big grasp on what is being taught and what is in the textbooks in every school, because they order the most textbooks. And so when they're deciding what is in textbooks, they essentially get monopoly on what things are included and what things are not. So do you have a way to, in your school board, affect what the Texas Board of Education is putting in the local system? Because I assume you're a public school. Is that correct?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, as far as influence, I don't really know what school board members can do to affect change with the Texas Association of School Boards. So it's called TASB, Texas Association of School Boards, and most of the school districts are members of the TASB. So Frisco is one of them, and same with the other suburbs. So I do think they can affect change and influence what happens from the Texas school boards. I mean, we're seeing a lot. I mean, I'm sure you've heard nationally, like, latest thing is the library books that are coming around in these schools. And so we're fighting that as well. I mean, we've certainly found, parents have found books in the libraries that are definitely sexually provocative, that kids shouldn't be reading. So that's also something that we're trying to affect change on. So as far as an actual board, the actual Frisco school board and the other school boards as well, I do think they have the power to influence the TASB and as far as the teaks in those books as well. So as a matter of fact, one of our board members is the incoming president. I don't know if she's there yet or not, but for TASB, she just got elected to be the president of the Texas Association of School Boards. So we're hoping with that kind of link that there would be some kind of change that we could affect with that.
Tell me more about the other issues that you mentioned.
Sure. So this past election season, obviously the CRT was a big issue, but also Our school district has started a pilot program. They started it in 2021 with 8 of our middle schools. And so, like I told you, folks come to Frisco for the schools. They want the advanced level learning, especially in the elementary and the middle school levels. Because when you get to high school, you take these AP courses. I'm sure you've heard of those. So, but in the middle school and elementary, you can take advanced level courses above what we call on level. So on level is just standard academics, but you can go advanced, and that's what we've always had. So Frisco is doing a pilot program where they are combining the on level with the advanced level courses for English in 8 of our middle schools. And what they are arguing is that when you don't have kids that are high level achievers, that somehow that's not equitable. And so they're saying, well, we'll just combine both of those classes together. And that one of our big arguments, and that's not only ours, but lots of parents, is that no, we have a system set up for advanced level coursework and regular kids, because guess what? Sometimes regular kids can't do the advanced level stuff. And then, if you want to bring down or combine the two, the advanced level courses or kids are now combined with on level, and it's not equitable. And so that's one of the things that they've marketed it, is that, hey, we want an inclusive and equitable program that benefits all the kids. And so it's been about a year now that they've been running it. And so our argument is that, if you truly want a program that benefits both the kids, we don't need to be using terms like equity and inclusiveness, because our argument is that the school's already inclusive. You can take it or you can't take it. So for us, we think it's basically a dumbing down of the curriculum. And a lot of parents that are with our group also agree they don't want their advanced level kids with their on level kids. It's just not how the system was designed. So that's one of the things that we've been really fighting hard against. And we're seeing that nationwide. It's not just where we live. It's a lot of school districts that are starting to do that, where you get rid of the advanced level coursework, because to us, it seems like they just want a common outcome. They want everybody to be the same. They don't want outstandingness versus not outstanding achievers. They want them all mixed in together. So that's another big thing that we're fighting as well. And we're also looking at what's called standards-based learning. Have you heard of that as well? Standards-based versus traditional.
Yep.
Yeah. So traditionally, like you and I and most people of our generation, our performance was graded on hard grades like A, B, C, D, and F. And so now there's this new push nationwide called standards-based learning, where you meet academic gates, basically gateways. And so there's the ultimate goal is to get rid of regular traditional grading. So, and part of that is if you don't do well on a test, you can retake it. And that showed up years ago with my daughter when she was in high school, when she first started. And she goes, hey, Dad, I got a bad grade on a test. And I said, well, that's too bad. So sad. You're going to have to study next time a little harder. And she says, no, I can retake the test. And it just really took me aback. I said, what do you mean you can retake it? And so that's part of this standards-based learning is retaking tests to meet the standard or the objective, the metric that they've set up, versus just taking a failing grade and doing better next time. So that's another one that we're seeing come along. So we're really trying to keep that from happening as well, because again, the argument is on a national level is it's not equitable to have traditional grading. It's not fair, because some kids might not grow up in an environment where they can meet those objectives. And so now they've got this standards-based learning where you can retake tests, retake assignments, and meet the objectives versus you just failing and doing better next time. So I'm
not sure I see why that would be an issue. Because for me, like in video games, you play a level, you do bad, you just replay the level till you get good at it. So that part I'm not seeing as a huge problem. Like, why would that be a challenge to be able to retake assignments?
Well, because the argument is that in life, if you go beyond retaking assignments, in your job, you're setting yourself up. We think, and in a job environment, if you fail at something at the job, you fail. You don't get to retake that. It's just that's just not how we think life is supposed to be designed. And that's how, if you teach kids in school, you can just keep retaking things until you get the grade that you want. Now all of a sudden it's like, wow, maybe that's how life is too. I can do that as well. So that's one of the arguments that parents have told us, is that they don't want that kind of mentality taught to their kids, is that, you just have to redesign yourself and try harder the next time. So I don't know. It's an argument on both sides of that, but again, it's coming from an equity standpoint, an equity and inclusion type deal, which we've seen a lot lately. And so when they use that kind of terminology, it's for us, it's questionable. You know, is it really about equity? Is it really about inclusiveness? I mean, why are we even talking about that? You know, that seems to be what they use a lot with the schools.
Yeah, I would caution the fact that they use equity and inclusion as a justification doesn't necessarily mean that all of the policies that they would implement are bad, because they could still have good policies in that case. And to me, that doesn't sound like a bad policy. To me, it sounds like, because the goal of school isn't like a job. The goal of school is to prepare kids to get enough knowledge to be able to function in society. And if they fail at a test, I don't think they should be like anchored down by that failure. If they have an opportunity to relearn it, retake the test, that sounds like a great idea. Sounds like a better way to learn, to be able to retake things and improve your score over time. Instead of just retaking the entire grade or whatever, you can retake a test. Seems like a more plausible solution to me. But are there any other issues that you think are real big challenges that you see happening?
Well, and to your point, to go back to that, part of this standards-based learning is, you know, my kids, when this stuff was just starting to get introduced to the schools, is, you know, one of the components is, if you take a test and you don't get the grade that you want, you can take it as many times as you want to get up to a certain grade, right? And so it's indefinite. And so it's not just a one-shot deal. So some schools you could take up to an 85. Other schools within our district said, oh, you can keep taking it till you get to 100. And so for us, it's a continuous thing where you just keep taking it until you get the grade that you want. But part of that too is what we call a waterfall grading policy. So, you know, if you have a quiz and a couple assignments that lead up to the test, you know, if you don't do well on those and you get to the test, and let's say you don't do well and you take it over and over till you get what you want, you can then waterfall those grades down to the quiz and the homework assignments. Now all of a sudden you've got a better grade for everything. And so what kids were doing, what my kids were seeing, is that they were kind of throttling back on doing well in the assignments and the quizzes, right? They get to the test and they retake the test to the grade that they want. And then all of a sudden, boom, it replaces your quiz and your homework assignments that you may have slacked off on. So it was a way to.
What is that? Could you explain that more? The waterfalling. So like if they do well on the test, you said it just replaces the scores on the other assignments. Like that doesn't make sense, right?
Think of the waterfalls, right? You're top of the waterfall, you know, you get a good grade and then it washes downhill. So anything that led up to the test, you know, those grades would then fall down, and then it replaces all the things that supported or led up to that test. So that's part of it. So like I said, what the kids were doing is they figured out, well, if I don't have to do too well in my homework assignments and my quizzes, and I can retake a test as many times as I want, then I can just replace all those grades with that test grade. So that's kind of like water falling downhill, and it replaces all those things. So I think part of that's been refined now. I think the district caught on to it and like, yeah, we need to reassess that. But there is still the opportunity to take tests indefinitely until you get the grade that you want. So argument for us is that it's a false pretense for the kids, and it also creates a boatload of work for the teachers, because now they've got to re-administer a test, re-administer an assignment, whatever it is. And it's just repetitive work for teachers that are already burdened down by a pretty heavy workload as it is. So that's where that comes from. So those are the things we're looking at. Also, we've got a lot of schools are having discipline problems in the schools because they're just too afraid to discipline the kids. And so that's something that we need to look at. And that's also a nationwide thing, is that we're seeing a lot of kids that just aren't disciplined in the schools. They're coming into the schools, and the schools are not doing what they need to make sure that they're running a good operation. So for my kids' school, they had a lot of vandalism in the bathrooms just because it was a TikTok challenge. I think there was a TikTok challenge to steal stuff out of bathrooms, you know, like anything from the sink to stall doors to the hand dryers. And so the kids were stealing stuff out of there, and not a whole lot was going on as far as discipline. And so I don't really know what the reason is for that, but you know, when I went to school, we never ever even thought of vandalizing the school because the repercussions would have been so high. You'd be kicked out, you know. So I don't know what's driving that. That really came on at the end of last year. So and again, it's not just in Frisco. It's a nationwide thing where we've just lost the discipline in the schools. I don't know if that's a home thing or not, but that's also something that's come about. The other thing, and I mentioned earlier, is social emotional learning (SEL) programs. And did you say you've heard of those as well?
I've heard of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's an entire construct, or it's an entire teaching premise where we're teaching kids about your social awareness, how you socialize with kids, your emotional state, how are you in your emotional state, and so we it's I don't know the budgetary numbers on it, but there's a lot of money spent on these programs. And so one of our basic premises is that you go to school, you should be taught the basics. You teach the math, the English, the literature, critical thinking, sciences. Those are the things that kids go to school for. And we argue that so much of the budget is being used for these new social emotional learning programs, and that's money that should be spent more towards the academic side. So for us, and my belief specifically is at home, that's the parent's job. We teach our kids about social emotional learning. We teach our kids about sexuality and all these things. That's not something that should be taught in the schools. And those funds that are used for that kind of curriculum could be more dedicated towards the basics, like we're talking about. So that's also something that we're fighting back against as well.
That was something I'd be curious about. So like sex ed, I think, is important because I know the data on sex ed and having sex education in schools has significantly better outcomes for lower teen pregnancy, lower STD rates, better birth control, lots of things. So it seems like sex ed, I think, there's a lot of data that shows that it's good to teach that in high schools. I don't know about the emotional thing. I do know that a lot of the stuff we teach in schools is not the best, and we should be teaching more practical skills that people actually use in life, like how to do your taxes, how to raise a kid, how to do
Yeah.
things that more than just the technical stuff. So I think like going through American history is probably less important than how to like live. So I don't know what the emotional learning stuff would constitute, but I think that there is an argument that there are certain classes that are more important or as important as the basics, like English, math, and science. And so I'd have to know more about what they're teaching in the emotional classes and whether or not those would be beneficial to really say if it was a good idea to reject them out of hand.
Yeah. I agree with you totally. I mean, clearly kids have emotional issues, but again, I think that's something that should be handled at home versus school. And I don't have a problem with the school identifying like, hey, something seems wrong with your kid, and maybe you should get them some counseling. But I don't think it's a school's part to be doing that as well. So.
But why do you say that? Because for me, like emotional skills and social skills are something that are vastly important and I think should be taught in schools in some way. Because I don't think a lot of parents know how to teach those. It's not like uh, if you have extrovert parents, then they're probably very, very good at teaching those. You have introvert parents, they're probably not very good at teaching those. And so I think that having a kind of standardized system to be able to teach social skills would probably be a good thing overall. I wouldn't see that as a bad thing.
Yeah, I would say social interaction, that would be fine, but as far as emotions and all these, things like that, on the psychological side, I mean, to me, I think that's a home taught thing. That's where that should be done. But to your point, and I will say our district is very good about professions. So we have what's called a CTE center. That's something training and education center. It's a standalone building where kids learn basic skills, like my daughter went for a health one. She got her CNA, which is like a pre-nursing license. They have mechanics, they have body shop, they have all those things. So that money is spent very well, and that's something that we're very much in favor of. So those are the kind of things that absolutely should be taught, because we've been taught for years, go to college, but there's a lot of kids who would do better off hands-on. I mean, that's where that should be. So we think that's where the money needs to be directed, and that's a better use for taxpayer funds for doing that as well. So so that I agree on 100%.
Yeah, definitely. So for next time or the next interview you do, it'd be really helpful to have like information on what they're teaching in these emotional courses and if you have any data on it being not beneficial or not useful for the child in future, that would definitely be helpful to understand why this would be challenges. Because right now, I don't know anything about it. All I've heard is that the labels, the names, that it's the emotional training stuff, and I don't know if that's inherently bad or not. So for me, it's hard to really say one way or the other without the further information of like what are they teaching and is there data to show this is good or bad.
Right. Right. Understood. Yeah, it's a fairly new program for us that they started out. It's not 100% rolled out because it's a lot of schools are just now starting to use that. So we're still learning as well, but it really does it's very much focused on the emotions of the child, and so a lot of people, well, not a lot, but people have said, well, it's another means of interjecting critical race theory type stuff into the curriculum. So I haven't really seen that myself personally. So that's something that will have to come for that as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Do you have other examples you can give us of things that you were trying to change, improve in the system?
Um, those are the big things coming right now. Another thing, I don't know if you read recently, but Texas is part of a lawsuit. It was on the news online. The USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, they subsidize a lot of these free meals for school districts all across the country. And so our school district took those funds as well during COVID. And so I don't know how much it is, but it's a fair amount of money. So it's free lunches for anybody, free lunches and free breakfast for kids. It's a lot of money that the USDA put out there. So Texas is part of a lawsuit now because one of the provisions is that the USDA and the federal government said, well, if you're going to take funds for this program, then you need to be teaching. Let's see. They had to make a statement in their policies about gender identity in our school district. Now, I don't know exactly what the statements were, but it had to be some kind of inclusion where, a lot of these school districts, and I don't know if it's ours that had to do this as well, but they had to identify that, based on discrimination, things that we don't discriminate based on your gender identity now. So now they have to make some kind of policy changes where, this thing about, gender fluidity has come into view with a lot of these kids. So that's something that we're seeing as well. I can't really prove that we took money for that in exchange for that in our policies too. But that's something else that we're having to research as well. So it's an argument for the whole country where they say, hey, you know what? We are good at teaching our kids and educating our children, but the heavy hand of the federal government, we just don't want them dictating everything that we teach. And so now you're seeing a lot of money being given to school districts, right, in exchange for more federally based influence on those programs. And that's one of them as well. So, and that's been going on for a long time. I mean, the federal government and the national education that's a fight between the states and the feds and also certainly the local districts as well. So, those are the big ones, for this last election cycle. It was for us and a lot of the parents who are now being educated is that, hey, these are some of the things that were going on in the schools, the critical race theory, the ILA program where you're combining on level with advanced level kids, and so it's just things that we're not used to seeing being here for so many years because it's changed rapidly, and that's we're seeing a lot of that.
Yeah, I can definitely see the challenges with combining the higher level and lower level students, because I think that if students are performing well, they should be given the opportunity to take higher level classes, which could potentially be given college credits and give them advancements. I think that that's absolutely a beneficial role that those kids can play in society, and just forcing them to be in the lower level classes where they're not being challenged to definitely not be as beneficial to those kids as having the opportunity to excel in the things that they're good at. So I definitely would agree with you on that one for sure. Definitely, if the article you listed is right, where it says all white people are contributing to systemic racism, clearly that's a problem. That's just overt racism. That's got to go for sure. And the waterfall line, I think, is also an issue. If your grades of your work can be overwritten by redoing and just a test, that kind of, you're right, completely eliminates any purpose of doing any of the assignments. Because I was like that too. I hated going to school. I did the absolute least work possible I could. to get the passing grade.
Yeah.
And so anything I could do to game the system, I did it. My high school, I had completed all of my credits required for my degree in essentially junior year, and so I had like 4 or 5 free classes, free periods in my senior year. So I didn't have to go to school for some days, but my teachers were really pissed at that, so they made me go anyway. But
Yeah.
yeah, I can understand what the kids are definitely going to try to game the system to get out of all the extra work, and I think that's irrational. Those are good
And
sign of the kids doing problem solving, critical thinking skills. But yeah, I think that the waterfalling definitely eliminates a lot of the point of a lot of the exercises.
yeah, and colleges are catching on to it. There's colleges that say, hey, you know what, we know we absolutely know how you guys are using your grading system. And they say, there are kids in the country who don't have the opportunity to retake tests, who don't have the opportunity to do waterfall grading. And so they look at the metrics and they say, hey, you were given these opportunities. You might have all A's in school, but we know how you got it. Now you're up against kids who didn't have that. And so they're making adjustments for their admissions policies based on that. So that they see that one kid has an advantage over the other. So my
Well, that
daughter,
wouldn't affect like ACT, SAT scores. Like you don't get to retake those. So it's even if the do you happen to have any data of kids going through this program and taking SAT, ACT, see if they how well they do respectively to the traditional grading system?
based on this new standards based stuff. I don't have any data on that. No, not as far as the SAT is concerned. No.
Because I think that'd definitely be really interesting. Because if kids taking this new system do significantly worse on the SAT or ACT, then that's a good argument against the system, that they aren't as prepared for college as the classical system. So that would definitely be, if there's information out there, it would definitely be helpful to make your case against the new system for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's, again, all this is really come around after COVID came about. So it's still being implemented, I think, especially with the advanced level stuff. They're still looking at performance data, combining the advanced level with the on level kids. So we're still kind of in the test phase of that for our district. But again, this is something that's happened all over the country, where you're getting a combination of the advanced level and the on level kids. So it's happening as we speak. So maybe it wasn't the way that you and I were raised, but it was a pretty tough sell when I was a kid. You either got the grade or you didn't. And so that forced you to re-engineer, like, how am I going to study the next time to get a better grade on the test? Your hand was forced. You either got it or you didn't, or you go get the tutoring that you need. So I struggled in college. I mean, it was in school. I had to try really, really hard to get what I needed to get done. So it takes a lot of work.
Yeah, for me, my position is like, the way it was done for me, I don't really care about. What I care about is which system has the best proven results for the kids. Because I obviously think there's going to be better ways to teach education than the way I was taught, for sure. People are going to make discoveries in the future that there's going to be better ways to do it. Once we can demonstrate, if we have data that shows this is a better way, then I'll be like, okay, we're justified in doing this, even if it seems silly to me. So that's the sticking point for me, is like, I got to see the data to know which way is actually demonstrably better.
Right.
And that's the part that I'm like, I need data.
Yeah. You got to have data. That's so true. But to your point as well, just teaching kids, like I teach my kids, how do you balance a checkbook? How do you look at a bank statement and see what's right and what's wrong? How do you, I'm off $200 in my account, go find it. Where is it? So that's the kind of stuff, how to budget your money, finances, how do you invest, and for me, I tell my kids, the easiest thing for me is don't spend money, because I'm cheap. That's how I've always been. So,
yeah.
But
yeah, I definitely think for me, those are some of the bigger topics in education reform that I'm a big advocate for. I think that there's a lot of things we need to teach in schools to make kids prepared to be able to live and function as adults that are not being taught. And that's something that's a big concern for me in the education system.
Do you think these are things that should be better taught at home, though? Like the parents, like, hey, it's ultimately your job to do that.
Well, no, because I think that's the problem, is that of the diverse range of parents, a lot of them don't have the skill set to be able to teach these to their kids. Like, I know my parents did not have social skills. Like, I got no social skills from my parents. So that's something I'd never learn at home. I'd just be completely cut off from ever being able to have those skills if I didn't. wasn't given some opportunity in school to learn them. And I
Mm.
think the same thing applies to like balancing a checkbook. If your parents don't know how to balance a checkbook, you're not going to learn how to balance a checkbook from your parents. And so I think that it's important to have the core skills that are required to function in society be taught in schools in some kind of standardized curriculum, so that you know that the kids have an opportunity to gain this information when their parents aren't going to necessarily be able to give it to them. That's the part that I'm concerned about when you say like give parents the opportunity to teach it to their kids. I'm worried about the parents who won't or don't know how. Because obviously there are lots of great parents out there who do teach their kids like that. That's something I missed. I really wish I had some like jock parents who taught me how to pick up girls at a mall. I wish that would a life skill I was totally missing. But because I know my parents didn't really help with any of that kind of stuff, I know that there's a need in public schools to be able to offer those skills to students whose parents aren't going to be able to teach them a lot of them.
Yeah, I could agree with that. I could agree with that as well. I mean, my folks were pretty tough on me, and my big learning experience was, if you want to go to college, go figure it out. Go figure out how to pay for it. And I did. And we'll give you a place to live in the summer, and you can just go figure out how to pay for college. And that's what I did. But yeah, it is definitely something that needs to be taught, especially raising children, because that's a tough job. It just is.
Yep, for sure. Especially for like single mothers and things, like they just don't have time to try and teach all their kids all those skills. And well, again, a lot of them just don't have it. So yeah, but I think you do bring up a lot of good points, especially about the joining high level and low level classes, the waterfalling, and the racism thing, the overt racism that's actually in the textbook is pretty ridiculous. Those definitely need to change. All for you support and hope you do really well and have a great opportunity in changing those, get those out of the
Yeah.
textbook.
And I tell my kids, when that stuff came around, when we started seeing, a lot of this racially based stuff happening, it creates divisiveness amongst the kids. They really truly believe it. And so I give my own story. I fly for a living, but I started at the very bottom of the ladder. I started out as a baggage handler, and I moved up as a mechanic, and then I moved up as a pilot. And so in those experiences, I worked with people from many walks of life, and we from many different backgrounds, and we got along great. That our world, our country, is not a systemically racist country. There's just not all this angst and hate outside of your school walls. I mean, people do get along very well, and I don't want my kids to think that, or any kid to think that that's what our country is about. What's happened in the past is in the past. We've come a long way since the civil rights era. And we hear this term racism used so much, racism. And now they have systemic racism. And it's just not good to teach our kids that, or anyone for that matter.
I think I would definitely agree with you there, because I think that the way the academic CRT is using racism is completely different from the way most people understand what the word means. So like racism, as you mentioned, in the way that you understand it, is like a kind of vitriol or hate or dislike for different groups. But the way they're using it is more just any system that happens to contribute to the fact that there was racism in the past is by definition racist, and your intentions don't matter, your desires don't matter, what you feel doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I think that by that definition, it is true that certain things do that, but it shouldn't be called racism, because the intent behind the racism, I think, is a critical usage of the word that's understood in society. And if you just change that to something completely different, it does cause people this confusion and vitriol of like not of seeing hate and desire, hate and evil intentions where there aren't any.
Right. And there'll always be racism. I mean, there is always racism. There'll always be racist people, but are we systemically racist? Are we inherently racist today? I don't think so. I don't, and children, their minds are so malleable. They're at school, they believe, hey, this is a learning institution. This is what I'm being taught. It must be true, so it's just, it's not fair to the kids at all. That's where we come from. So
I'd definitely say that there are some instances of systemic racism. There are definitely some systems, but it's not the majority. The vast majority are not. And again, I think the way that they're teaching is wrong, because of the way most people understand racism has nothing to do with the fact that there's some program or something that disenfranchises one group in some way. That's not what the word racism means. So I think it's wrong to try to teach that, especially to to school kids who don't understand the complex usage of the word racism and systemic racism in that context, and the way it affects them emotionally is more tied into how the word is more classically used about vitriol and intentions. So yeah, I think that that's definitely an issue that we should try to use the common usage of the language and the way most people use it to prevent kinds of confusion like that.
Yeah, because when you say a word over and over and you say racist, 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 it loses its effectiveness. It just it does, versus truly instances where it truly is racist situation. So I think it's been, certainly in the national context, I think it's been overused in the past few years. It seems like it's just every day something's racist. So I don't want our kids going out into a world thinking that that's what awaits them, as a world full of racism. It's not fair to the kids at all. So not productive.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a lot of because I have a lot of left-leaning people in my chat. And one of the objections they say is, well, you don't understand systemic racism. And I think that that's technically the way you're using racism isn't the same as what is intended by the usage of systemic racism. But I think that's because they're using it in this very weird, pedantic way. And the kids don't understand that either. And so I think that
No.
your interpretation is going to mirror what the kids are going to understand this to mean, which is the problem. They should not be interpreting it in this way. And the fact that they are is due to this malformation of language used by the CRT model. And so I think that you have a very valid point in that using this kind of language, especially to teach kids, is a wrong way to do things.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, that's pretty much what we're fighting here on a national level. That's what's we're seeing a lot of. So
Yeah. So just again, some suggestions for the future. Give me lots of pictures and information about like the actual articles so we could see them. A lot of people who've advocated against CRT have had a lot of success showing the actual documents of what they're teaching in schools. I remember there was I forget which school board it was, where someone was literally just reading one of the textbooks in the school board meeting, and she got like banned, or they had to shut her down because it was inappropriate content. So definitely showing more of the things in the education system that are the problem would be really helpful to your cause, to be able to motivate people to see why this is really an issue. Because on the left, the media on the left really says this, oh, it's not a real thing, this is not happening, it's just fake news. And so really being able to demonstrate that it is happening would be super helpful to your cause.
Yeah. Well, that's, like I said, when we went to the school board meetings, people were reading from stuff like that. But I can certainly forward you the things that evidence type stuff that we were looking at. So
appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So we've been going for about an hour. It was a great conversation. Really appreciate you coming on. Do you want to give any links or references where people can find out more about your program and how to support you?
Yeah, you can go to our we have a Facebook page. It's Families and the number 4 Frisco. You can find us there. We're also online. We've got a webpage as well. So we've got a chat as well that you can find through our Facebook page on Families for Frisco. So that's where a lot of our information gets disseminated. A lot of the parents who come to us like, hey, I found this in my son's assignment, or hey, this is what's going on in the schools. That's how they come to us, is through our Facebook page. So that's the best place to do it.
Awesome. Thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a wonderful day.
Tom, thank you so much. I appreciate it.